What is up everyone, Hero276 here and welcome to today's video and welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be running EMOLGA in the Great League Remix Cup. EMOLGA is an electric and flying type Pokemon with the moveset of Thundershock, Discharge, and Acrobatics. Now this Pokemon is not the Pokemon that you would first think of as your first choice for this meta. However, a lot of the meta is very soft to electric damage. A lot of trainers have been using Shadow Magnezone and Shadow Zapdos to combat that problem. However, I don't have either one of those Pokemon built, so I decided to try EMOLGA and my Atlanta. It is a phenomenal sweeper. You're going to see it absolutely decimate teams. For the team, I have an Annihilape on the lead, as well as a Unova Stunfisk in the middle, so sort of creating this ABB style team. And I was able to go 12-3 with it. I had a lot of success running it in this meta. But before we dive into that, I just want to give a special shout out to my Spotify page. If you're enjoying the music used in this video and other videos, please consider checking out my Spotify page. You'll have access to all my music for free, or you can buy the albums for $4.99 each. So definitely go support that. If you're looking for other ways to support the channel, I would really appreciate it. But for now, let's dive right into these battles.
And we are starting today's video off with a very nice lead, Annihilape into Magcargo. The opponent is going to have to pivot out of this matchup. They send in Mandibuzz, and I'm going to send in the EMOLGA. The reason for this is because my Unova Stunfisk also does quite well into the Magcargo, but the EMOLGA does not, because Magcargo has that rock subtyping, and the EMOLGA has the flying subtyping, so keeping this away from the Magcargo is quite imperative. The unfortunate thing is I'm going to have to use shields in this matchup if I'm going to want to preserve alignment. The opponent is going to go for the Dark Pulse. I am going to shield that up, and from here I'm going to overfarm and then go for the Discharge. At this point, I should have alignment pretty much wrapped up. My opponent shields anyways, and I'm able to get off a second Discharge. Discharge here is going to KO the Mandibuzz unless they commit the second shield, but they end up letting the move go through. They send in a Gardevoir. Now I'm going to send in the Stunfisk. Stunfisk can tank these charms for days. My opponent surrenders, and that is game, set, and match. Hopping into the next one, picking up a lead, Annihilape into Mawile. This is not a very good lead for us. I will switch into the Unova Stunfisk, which is technically my hard counter, but my guess is that my opponent is going to be core broken, so I'm going to stay in here. The opponent is not switching out, which leads me to definitely believe that they are core broken. I will shield up this charge move. This is enough for the play rough. My opponent full sends the play rough. I'm going to look for the farm down. The opponent does not farm up enough for another play rough. I let the move go through. It is a power-up punch, so it's a very good no-shield on my part. My opponent sends in Jellicent, and yeah, they're weak to electric somewhere in the back. Gonna go here for the Discharge. Discharge is gonna grab the first shield for my opponent. I overfarm by one, throwing on good timing and getting off the next Discharge. Opponent lets that one go through, and Jellicent is in the yellow. I can survive a Surf from this health range. I let it through. It's actually a Bubble Beam, which is very good news for me. That does not do a lot of damage. Jellicent's going to have to go for a Shadow Ball to pick up the knockout. I grab the second shield with the Discharge, and EMOLGA is in business. Shields down, this thing is absolutely going to sweep, so I'm going to let the Unova Stunfisk go down. In comes EMOLGA. Opponent switches into a Mandibuzz. My opponent surrenders, and that is game, set, and match. Hopping into game number 2, picking up a much better lead, Annihilape into Obstagoon. The opponent is going to switch out of this matchup. They send in a Pidgeot, and I switch in Unova Stunfisk. Unova Stunfisk definitely has the pacing advantage in this matchup. Gonna go for the Discharge. That does a lot of damage onto the Pidgeot. I can survive a charge move from this health range. They go for the Brave Bird. That does not do a lot of damage. Unova Stunfisk is very bulky. Gonna go here for the next Discharge. Their defense is lowered. My opponent is going to shield that one up. They're going to go for another charge move, and I'm just going to mirror shields in this one. My opponent only ends up going for a Feather Dance bait. That's unfortunate, but I'm going to overfarm here, and I will fire off the Discharge just before they get to their next charge move. Opponent shields it up. At this point, now I'm inclined to double shield my Unova Stunfisk. Unova Stunfisk wins this in all even shield scenarios. They showed me they're weak in the back. They pivot back into the Obstagoon, and I send back in the Annihilape. These counters are doing so much damage to the Obstagoon, and that's one of the reasons why Obstagoon has fallen out of favor. As even with the boost, I get the full counter farm down. My opponent sends back in the Pidgeot, but I could just go for a Night Slash. Night Slash is going to KO the Pidgeot, and now it's Annihilape's turn to boost. They have Hypno in the back, but Shadow Ball is gonna one-shot the Hypno, and we take the win. picking up a very spicy lead in game number 3 as we lead into Giraffe Rig. Gonna check the fast move, it's Confusion. I switch out of the matchup into Unova Stunfisk. My opponent pivots into Empoleon, and this is not a response to Unova Stunfisk. We hit for super effective with everything we throw, as well as resisting the Steel Wings. I decide to overfarm, but I play to a CMP tie that I end up losing. Very nice timing by my opponent, anticipating when I throw. They go for the Drill Peck. I undercharge the Mud Bomb here. This still will probably KO, but my opponent ends up giving the shield. Because my opponent threw Drill Peck, I was certain in this moment that they did not have Hydro Cannon, but they ended up going for the Hydro Cannon there, so I'm at a loss for words. Anyways, I send in the Emolga, and I get a Thunder Shock's worth of energy. Back in comes the Giraffe Rig, and at this point, I will start shielding. Opponent is going to go for a Psychic Fangs. That's going to lower my defense. The opponent switches out into an Arcanine. I bank a lot of energy for later and send in the Annihilate. Annihilate, I'm just going to sacrifice it at this point. It's useless pretty much up against the Giraffe Rig. At this point, I will go for the Shadow Ball. Could have gone for the Night Slash. Opponent will likely be shielding this up, but I either wanted to guarantee the shield or the knockout, and in case they called the Night Slash, I don't know. In the moment I felt it was safer, it probably wasn't. Either way, they're going to take me out with the Psychic Fangs. Back in comes the Emolga to use up all of this energy. I'm going to go for the Discharge to pick up the knockout, as I do not want a Psychic Fangs lowering my defense, and I'm able to make it to an Acrobatics to pick up the knockout on the Giraffe Rig, and we take the win. Hopping into game number 4, picking up a lead into Victreebel. This is a pretty tough lead for both the Annihilate and the Unova Stunfisk, as both of them do quite poorly. I farm up to the Night Slash, but it looks like my opponent caught the Night Slash. Very nice catch onto the Mandibuzz. This time though, I get to send in the Unova Stunfisk, and this Mandibuzz is running Air Slash, which definitely makes this matchup a lot more favorable for the Ufisk. As well, Ufisk has a pretty poor matchup into the Victreebel, unless it has an energy head start, so by sending it in here to the Mandibuzz, I'm letting it avoid the Victreebel. Gonna go for another Discharge. I don't think this is gonna quite KO, or even put it into Mud Bomb range, which is quite unfortunate. Mandibuzz is just really bulky. My opponent is gonna go for another charge move, but Unova Stunfisk is very bulky. I'm gonna be able to survive this charge move, no problem. They end up Aerial Ace baiting, which is really strange, but now I'm gonna go for the Discharge. Discharge picks up the knockout. My opponent sends back in the Victreebel, but like I said, they struggle if I have an energy lead, because Mud Bomb's going to do a lot of damage. They commit a shield. I send back at the Annihilate, forcing them to throw, and from here, I'm actually going to shield because I should be able to make it to a Night Slash. The opponent sends in a Poliwrath, going to go for the Night Slash bait. This is extremely risky. Opponent shields up the bait. I get the boost as well. Annihilate going on a rampage right now. Shadow Ball's going to one-shot the Poliwrath. One more Magical Leap is going to KO the Annihilate, but I can send in the Emolga, and I'm going to look to go for the Acrobatics here. My opponent surrenders, and that is game, set, and match. And as you can see, that's a very nice 5-0 set by this team. We're going to showcase a couple more bonus battles, so don't go anywhere. You're not going to want to miss them. Hopping into the first of 3 bonus battles, picking up a lead Annihilate into Mandibuzz. The energy that I have here is very much walled, so I'm going to look to stay in the matchup, wait till they get to the Aerial Ace, attempt the catch onto Unova Stunfisk. I cannot get the catch, and that's quite unfortunate. My opponent will outpace me to the Discharge. They end up going for the Dark Pulse. I overfarm by 1, so I throw on good timing, and I get off the Discharge. Discharge will do some solid damage onto the Mandibuzz. Like I said, probably not enough to 2-shot from this health range, but maybe with the counters, I can get it very close. Discharge number 2 is going to pick up the shield from my opponent. My opponent will now be firing off more energy, but I can tank this. Unova Stunfisk is very bulky. I'll be able to sponge that very well. I can even tank the next Dark Pulse if I wanted to, so I like to no shield. It gets me low. I send in the Emolga, so they do not get the farm down. My opponent now sends in Empoleon, and yeah, they're core broken by the Emolga. Gonna go for the Discharge. Discharge is gonna grab the shield for my opponent. I get off the next Discharge, and it's on a CMP tie. Empoleon has no more shields left. They get KO'd by the Discharge. They send in a Poliwrath, and yeah, this game is over. I'm able to outpace here to the Acrobatics. Acrobatics is gonna one-shot the Poliwrath. They send back in the Mandibuzz, but I have 2 shields left. Emolga is gonna go on an absolute tear. We shield up the Dark Pulse. We get off the Discharge. Discharge here is gonna KO the Mandibuzz, and we take the win. Hopping into the next game, picking up a lead, Annihilate into Unova Stunfisk. I do like this matchup here for the Annihilate because counters and Shadow Balls will really start to add up, as well we can survive one charge move very comfortably because Unova Stunfisk doesn't hit very hard. They're going to go for the Mud Bomb, not going to do a ton of damage here to the Annihilate. They try to catch my Shadow Ball onto Mandibuzz, but I'm able to pivot and send in my own Unova Stunfisk. The better choice here would have been the EMOLGA, since it would have been able to avoid the Unova Stunfisk. And Unova Stunfisk is a wall to energy from the EMOLGA. Gonna go for the discharge. My opponent lets it go through. I'm also going to be able to outpace to another discharge. Discharge here will start to get the Mandibuzz quite low. And I don't think they're quite in Mud Bomb range, so to be sure, I'm going to go for another discharge as soon as I get there to pick up the knockout. I'm going to farm up and throw the discharge as soon as I get there. Discharge will pick up the knockout onto Mandibuzz if they decide to let it go through, which they do. Down goes Mandibuzz. My opponent sends back in their own Unova Stunfisk. From here, I'm just going to let the move go through. I'm going to send in the Annihilate that has a lot of stored energy. I'm going to throw the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball here will not quite knock out, but it does a ton of damage. I immediately pivot into the EMOLGA. My opponent sends in their final Pokemon, and it's Pelipper, so this game is pretty much over. We go for the discharge. The opponent has to go Weather Ball here because Hurricane is resisted. Opponent is going to fire off their energy. They go for the Hurricane anyways. It's not enough to KO. I decide to overfarm on energy. I have a couple of shields, so I might as well start using them, and I'm going to look for the full Thundershock farm down. EMOLGA gets the farm down, back in comes the Stunfisk, but we just have too much energy. Discharge is triple resisted, but it picks up the knockout, and we take the win. We have one final battle for you today, leading Annihilate into Mantine. With two electric types, I'm going to pivot into the Unova Stunfisk, which is my safe switch technically on the team, and my opponent is staying in here. They don't farm up to enough for the Ice Beam. They're actually running Bubble Beam, which is very useful information for me. Gonna go for the discharge. Discharge grabs a shield from the Mantine. Opponent is gonna fire off another Bubble Beam. I'm gonna be double debuffed, but these discharges are still gonna hit very hard. I am now double debuffed. I watch for a catch. They send in a Greedent. I fire off the Mud Bomb to stall the switch clock, and once my switch timer is up, I will look to send in the Annihilate, but I'm going to get off all this energy first. Greedent is very bulky, so two double debuff Mud Bombs are not going to do a lot of damage. The opponent is going to get off another charge move. If it's Trailblaze, I get knocked out. The running Trailblaze, I send an Annihilate. Annihilate is going to look for the full counter farm down. It cannot get it. Greedent is able to make it to another charge move. Even with the attack boost, Trailblaze is not going to be enough to KO. I no-shield it, and I get the counter farm down. Back in comes the Mantine, and I have a second electric type, so I'm going to go for the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball is able to do big damage onto the Mantine. I send in the EMOLGA. The opponent will fire off a Bubble Beam to debuff me, and let's see what that final Pokemon is. It's actually a Salazzle. Very cool spice from the opponent, but I have two shields here on the EMOLGA, so this should straight up be a win. What I'm going to look to do is overfarm by 2 and throw on good timing to get off the discharge bait. Discharge here is going to pick up the shield from the Salazzle. Salazzle's left his shield, so it's no surprise that the discharge got shielded. Now I can KO with the acrobatics. Back in comes the Mantine. Mantine cannot get the farm down. I'm able to get off a final discharge to pick up the win. Overall, I love EMOLGA's ability to fully sweep teams. It's not the bulkiest Pokemon by any stretch, so give it a shield advantage just to be safe, but its energy is unanimously useful against anything not named Unova Stunfisk. Like I said earlier, I was inspired by a lot of people using electric types to combat the meta, because the meta right now is very weak to electric damage, and I found EMOLGA to be an absolute sleeper. Anyways, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.